name of this right now. You ever heard that story? This book has a lot of information on this. Decisive by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. These are brothers. This is about the science of making decisions. And in this, they tell a story about, I think it was Van Halen, that was doing huge rock concerts all over the nation. And their rock concerts required very, very technical setups in order to not blow up the stage and kill the performers. And so they had like a 400-page contract that they would send to these different venues, because they were doing venues in small locations, right? So it's not just San Francisco that's used to dealing with these type of things. They could be going to like Lodi, right? Where like, you know, they've never had that type of thing. And so buried in like page 251 on some random page was this clause that says, when the band arrives, you should keep a plate of M&Ms, and they all have to be brown M&Ms. And if you do not have all brown M&Ms, you have to pick out all M&Ms but the brown ones. And if there is a single non-brown, we will forfeit the entire contract. So you could lose tens of thousands of dollars. We could cancel the entire venue. And so the funny thing is, Van Halen would then, the moment they arrived, the first thing the band would do was go into the dressing room and check the M&Ms. And if there was a single brown M&M, they would stop everything and check it, because they realized that if the people putting together the shows didn't read that particular thing and realize the gravity, they were likely to mess up on a bunch of other portions of the contract, which would then put the lives of the performers in jeopardy. And so that was a tripwire. They used that brown M&M as a tripwire in order to tell them that they need to make a decision about what they're going to do next. And so I think one of the first things that I would say to Balaram is the habit of habitually asking ourselves the question, why am I doing this, and how does this relate to a larger vision of my life? Like scheduling that habit, just like church. This reminds me of church, right? Church on a weekly basis, those devout people that have a faith that go to church on a weekly basis, when Sunday hits, it's as if that, you know, the calendar goes from Saturday to Sunday, they see the brown M&Ms and they realize, I need to make a decision, and the decision is to go to church. And then all of a sudden, when they're in church, they've set aside ritual time to think through what their faith means through whatever lens they're going to do that. And the same way I think is really important in education, because our academic systems spend very, very little time investing in the individual nature of our students. I think one of the first things that I would say is to create these tripwires, these ritual habits that are, you know, so for me, here's my habit. Once a week, I'm going to read through that value statement and reflect on its meaning. Number two, I am constantly reading new information, and that's going to be the second habit that I'll talk about in a second, that guides my thinking and allows me to update that. Number three, once a quarter, usually at the end of the quarter, after I've submitted grades, before I've ever touched work on the next quarter, so I have this little like downtime. So in my vacation time, I dedicate 1 hour of time, and I very much treat it like it's I don't know, a baptism of a child, or like where I just, for that hour, the only thing that I'm doing is looking at that document and reflecting on its content, and then editing, updating anything that I think needs to be updated in that round. And at the end of the year, similarly, I have that tripwire. When January 1st comes around, you know, probably around December 15th, I'm starting to think like, oh, okay, it's that time again. Because those are just temporal markers that allow me to habitually come back to that. So I think that's number one, like giving ourselves permission to set that aside and recognize that is a very, very important habit that we can do for ourselves, supported by the concept of decision making, right? And use time mechanisms as the bowl of M&Ms. So for me, my time mechanism is weekly, quarterly, yearly, right? So I'm using those triggers to say, like, I need to make a decision on that purpose statement. I'm going to mark those in time, and then I'm going to go back and return to those. The second thing I would say for me that's super useful in this is the habit of deep reading for the sake of reading. And I've written that blog post on that. I'd like to move that blog post from my personal website over to the Learning Code website, Henry. I don't know if you're okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So the second thing that I think is really powerful for me is I do a lot of what I call exploratory reading. So maybe I can move that over sometime soon. basically, one of the things that's interesting about purpose is that I think it's best developed, or values or long-term vision is best developed within a context. And one thing that I recognize is that a lot of the purpose demonstrated or provided by academic content lacks so much context to it, because the curriculum is kind of filtered through this very, very small bubble of academia that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with our own lived experiences. And so one thing that I feel really, really is a fundamental mechanism by which I develop my own understanding of the world is to seek out a relatively constant stream of information in the outside of my academic degree that informs the way that I think about myself or contextualizes the work that I'm doing in a larger framework. Henry, you've seen some of that. I post a list of the books that I read in the exploratory level, not the deep level, in order to expose myself to ideas. And then the other, I guess, so that's number one, is to set temporal decision-making mechanisms where I'm routinely returning to, or you routinely return to the question of, what does purpose mean? Why do I want it? What is my purpose? Editable document that we can upgrade year after year, decade after decade, right? Number two is to create a habit of reading that allows us to expose ourselves to ideas that are well outside the small network of concepts in academia, and allows us to contextualize the work that we're doing in larger themes in the world around us. And yeah, I suppose the third one is to, I guess this is a principle, but it is a habit of thought, I suppose. I would encourage myself, and in this